Hi, everybody, and welcome to SPARE's webinar today for putting riders first and meeting the needs of today's paratransit riders. We're starting to get audience trickling in now, but with our 1 hour webinar slot, I'll just get started here. Welcome, I am Terry, SPARE's Product Marketing Manager, and I am so thrilled to be here today. I spent the past 6 years working with municipalities and transit agencies, and the last 2 years specifically in the mobility space. Before we jump in, I'd like to give an overview of what you can anticipate from today's presentation. SPARE's sessions are designed to be valuable, honest, and educational, and so we encourage you to ask questions throughout as we go along. For those of you who have never attended a Zoom webinar before, you can use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen, circled there in blue. Our team will be collecting them and leaving these questions for the open Q&A portion of the webinar at the end. Finally, the webinar will be recorded, so all registrants, including all of you on the line today, will receive the recording in your email. So what can you expect today? We'll be kicking things off with introductions from our panelists, then move into our panelist Q&A section covering the current state of paratransit and eligibility-based transportation programs. We'll also cover topics around how these agencies today serve their ridership by enhancing customer experience and leveraging modern technology to drive innovation in areas like mixed fleet models and digital eligibility management. For those of you who are not familiar with SPARE, our vision is to make every ride possible. We work with partners to deploy microtransit, first and last mile, employee commuting, and other types of demand response services, as well as partnering with North America's most forward-thinking transit agencies to design and deploy ADA and non-ADA services that are built for what the riders of today and the future needs. With that, I'll now pass it off to our VP of Partner Success, Quinn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Terry. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this fine day. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're all ready for an exceptional discussion. It's incredible to have such an amazing panel and audience joining us today. My name is Quinn. I am the VP of Partner Success at SPARE. I've worked at SPARE for close to 5 years now, where I've personally led the deployment of SPARE platform for over 100 different transit services, including a couple or multiple for PSTA, who has joined us today on our panel. So thank you, Bonnie. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by panelists Bonnie, Christopher, and Noah from PSTA and DART, respectively. These panelists will share their experiences working with modern technology, like SPARE platform, to power operations that prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable populations that need transit the most. We'll hear directly from Bonnie about how PSTA is delivering a modern, customer-centric paratransit experience for their PSTA access and their same-day mobility on-demand programs. We'll hear from Noah and Christopher about alternative transportation like the Rider Assistance Program that leverages non-dedicated fleet providers to introduce reliable and flexible transit. We'll also hear about how they've digitized and simplified their eligibility management process. And now I'll let our panelists introduce themselves, starting with Bonnie.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. I'm Bonnie Epstein, Director of Mobility at PSTA. I've been at PSTA for eight years. I used to work in our planning department. I've been the Director of Mobility for about 3 years. Our mobility department, our largest programs that we run here, I'll be discussing today, our PSTA access service and our same-day mobility on-demand program that's available for everyone that's in our ADA paratransit access service. But we also run many different programs, smaller scale with Uber and Lyft. We have a first last mile service, an overnight program, just lots of different things running in our mobility department.
Yeah, so much going on over at PSTA. Thanks, Bonnie. Awesome. I will throw it over to Noah.
Hi, everybody. Noah Berlin. I am the Director of Operations and Mobility Management Services here at Dallas Area Rapid Transit. I've been in transit since 2019, started as a business analyst. Most recently, I was the manager of business and planning for our department, so finances, reporting, as well as planning and implementation for our services. Just came into my current role in the last few months here, learning a lot about operating these services, but I've been involved with the Rider Assistance Program since before the transition into Spare. We use Spare for microtransit as well, so I'm very familiar and happy to be here.
Thanks, Noah. No shortage of things on your plate, it sounds like. And now we'll hand it over to Chris.
Yep, thanks, Gwen. Chris Hawkins, also with DART. I'm the Director of Administration for Mobility Management Services. As Noah said, we do paratransit, microtransit, which we call GoLink, and the rider assistance programs, which we'll be talking about today. I've been with DART for 13 years, and in mobility management's about half of that time. Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit more about rider assistance programs specific today, and happy to be here as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. So before we dive into the panel Q&A, let's hear a little bit more about the services that Spare powers for PSTA and DART. So to start us off, Bonnie, if you wouldn't mind giving us an overview of PSTA's access and MOD programs.
Awesome. Yeah. So just so everyone's aware, I love the picture here that we've chosen for PSTA. So we're in St. Petersburg, Florida, or Pinellas County, Florida. This is a great shot from downtown St. Petersburg, but that's our service area. We're just across the bay from Tampa. We have two services right now that we operate in Spare. The first one is our ADA paratransit service. So we call that PSTA Access. We've had a lot of changes over the past few years with how we operate the access service. We used to have just one local provider operating the service. We went through a change in our eligibility process in 2020. We switched providers. We have completely new providers that we've added in 2021. But now, actually, the largest service that our riders use, anyone that's eligible for the PSTA Access paratransit service, they go through the application process to become ADA eligible. Most of the riders have now transitioned their trips over to our Mobility on Demand program. That's a program that once you become ADA eligible, you can opt into and take your trip same day on Uber, Lyft, our local taxi, or local wheelchair. Riders really prefer taking their trips on demand. So right now, pre-COVID, I think we saw about 90% of our service was done on the pre-scheduled access service, and won't go into too much detail, but today about 60% of our service is done on the MOD side, and only 40% is pre-scheduled with our dedicated provider TransDev, their subcontractor user. We also use local taxi for the access service as well. Right now, the services are very separate, or riders don't see them as separate, but if you call in to make a reservation, if you book a trip for the future, we consider that an access ride. It's going to be done with our access providers. If you call to book a ride today or same day, we consider that a mobility on demand ride. We book it with Uber, Lyft, local taxi, or local wheelchair. Both of those services are in Spare. We previously used many different software providers, including RouteMatch. We had a small local company do our paratransit routing and scheduling called Tranware, and we had another small provider out of Washington State called Goen that did our mobility on demand program. So everything was kind of all over the place. We're really excited to have both programs in Spare. We've seen a lot of benefits to moving both programs into Spare. Very seamless booking, customers, not seeing not a big change for the customers. It's been really helpful for us to have everything all in one place. We're able to do lots of data analysis, pull data for our reports a lot easier. It's been a lot easier for us on the back end to add customers into just one platform as opposed to moving them, entering them in lots of different places, which has caused a lot of errors too in the past. So very excited to have Spare for both of our programs.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bonnie. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey that PSTA and Spare have been on so far, and we've accomplished so much. And it's been incredible to see the growth of the MOD program over that time frame. Although I know that also can present challenges sometimes too when riders see lots of value in the program. And I also just wanted to mention that Bonnie and I have walked that boardwalk at least a couple of times.
Yes.
So it's one of my favorite photos too. Awesome. All right. I will hand it over to Chris to speak to the DART RAP program.
Yeah, for sure. I'll preface this by saying the rider assistance programs, we consider it an alternative transportation program. It is not ADA paratransit. We do have, of course, at DART, a separate ADA paratransit program. But this is for riders with disabilities or individuals age 65 or older. They may not otherwise qualify for paratransit, so this is a good alternative program for them. It's similar in a way to kind of like an assisted fare program up to a certain threshold. But we run this in 7 of our DART member cities, and also currently the Collin County area of Fairview, Allen, and Wiley. Previously we were on Route Match, and currently, of course, on Spare. We also have our GoLink service on Spare as well. That's our microtransit program. But the service itself is run between a mix of dedicated accessible vehicles, and we use Lyft as a non-dedicated provider as well. Previously there just were a lot of, I guess you could say, paperwork challenges at DART. There's still a struggle with that, I'm sure, with a lot of transit agencies across the country, of just kind of those legacy programs coming across. But we're very excited to have more kind of a streamlined eligibility and onboarding process, and just cutting down on that paperwork. Ultimately, it's getting customers to where they need to go faster and more reliably. And so that makes the customer happy, then that makes us happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, the DART RAP program is such an interesting, valuable program, providing additional level of service to the community in Dallas. So we're really excited to have you both on the panel today and to speak more to this really innovative program. Awesome. So to start us off, let's dive into the current state of paratransit, like the ADA, PSTA access service and the non-ADA MOD program, and then also alternative eligibility-based transportation programs like the DART Rider Assistance Program. So at the heart of these services is access to transit and rider equity. This means rethinking transit services in the 21st century in a way that offers riders who don't have the same access to fixed routes or the same level of kind of spontaneity as others to live their life on demand. And this includes whether or not those riders qualify for ADA services or not. So as you all know, delivering reliable, on time, and crucially, cost-effective paratransit paratransit and eligibility-based transportation programs is notoriously difficult. So the FTA is, especially for ADA paratransit, really seen as a North Star that guides many US transit agencies in delivering paratransit, but navigating compliance comes with its own set of challenges. So at Spare, we like to think of inclusive and equitable transit in the sense that everyone, not just a lucky few, have access to spontaneous travel like same-day service and real-time trip visibility. Unfortunately, legacy software has not been able to deliver that. It has not been built to be interoperable or scalable. And as an industry, we're seeing a pivot towards using modern technology to really redefine how transit agencies can better serve vulnerable populations who need access to equitable transit the most. So that brings us to our first question for our panelists. So I'm going to start off with Bonnie. So Bonnie, how did your services operate prior to making the switch to Spare? And what was your experience like with your previous software?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we had many different software platforms that we used for paratransit and our mobility on demand program. Everything was separate. So I know this does sound a little bit confusing, but the process that we had previously was as a rider if a rider wanted to apply for our service, we first entered the rider into our access database. It's a homegrown database that we use at PSTA to go through the eligibility process. Once the customer became eligible, we would then enter the customer into our route match database that we used at PSTA that housed all of our client information. But that's not what our contractors used. So we would then export from route match over all the new client information or updated client information over to what they were using, Tranware, which had to be imported then into Tranware. So that was one jump. And then if the customer wanted to use mobility on demand, we then had to manually re-enter the information from either the eligibility database or from route match into the Goin platform. So as you can imagine, that took a lot of time. It was cumbersome. It left a lot of room for error. So we're excited that at least on the back end, almost everything is in one place. We are looking to replace our in-house eligibility module with Spare Engage, hopefully a little later this year. But we tried using route match when we first started using our new contractors, and I'll be honest, I could not figure it out. I tried it. I said I couldn't do it. It was too much for me. We later used Tranware, which is a local company here in Clearwater that our contractor was using. They also use that for their routing and scheduling of paratransit. A lot easier to use, had some benefits of being a local company. We're definitely one of their biggest clients, but there wasn't any, optimization, moving trips around in real time. There was a lot of still manual work that needed to be done. When we booked trips, we had to check, what time the routes were running and what route everything was booked to. It was very manual. We made it work, but moving to Spare, I feel like in a lot of ways that I'll talk about a little later as well, have brought us into the 21st century. So we're very excited to have everything in Spare.
Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, and I'm sure it does not sound like a super fun process having to manage those rider profiles across different platforms. And I'm sure the reporting as well was not fun either.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we could run reports, but having them not match exactly was really difficult for us. Yeah.
And Noah, I'd love to hear from you. Like, how did your service operate the RAP program prior to making the switch to Spare?
So it's funny to hear all of the parallels between PSTA's previous system and what we were using for the rider assistance programs. We used route match as well. I think we used it very differently than PSTA did. We had a completely separate kind of external eligibility process that was very paperwork heavy, as Chris mentioned earlier. It still required us to basically track eligibility on spreadsheets and lots and lots of phone calls and emails to customers trying to communicate with them, which there's always going to be when you have eligibility and you're reviewing documents. You gotta continue to communicate with your customers. But eligibility was challenging. The wallets were really challenging. The way that customers were adding fares, it was a separate website, a site that we had to try and get our customers to log into in order to add funds. That's very challenging, especially when you're providing programs for seniors, people with disabilities, having them log into a web page and use a kind of clunky payment system. They did not enjoy that. We did not enjoy managing it. There were some issues with operations as well. We had quite a few no-shows that would happen, issues with compliance, not able to get all the reporting that we needed. Lots and lots of things that were having to be accomplished outside of the technology solution, right? Which is frustrating for staff and is challenging, and it leads to errors, and it leads to missed trips sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Noah. And I think the wallet point is such an interesting use case too, in terms of like where we started and where we got to. Maybe we'll circle back to that later on here, but the DART team is doing some really innovative stuff in terms of fares and payments and subsidies that we worked really hard together to build I think a more seamless solution for in any case, but we'll get back to that soon. Thank you so much. All right, so next we'd actually love to hear from the audience. What are your biggest challenges that you've encountered for your paratransit or eligibility-based transportation program? So you should see a pop-up on your screen right now. If you wouldn't mind just filling out this quick survey, we'd love to hear from you. I'll give everyone a minute here. If you're just joining now, we're just giving everyone some time to fill out the poll. Oh, and I think we're done. Wow. All right, let's look at the results here. So everyone should be able to see the results in Zoom. So number one, driver staff shortages. Absolutely. This is something that we hear from our partners all the time, especially on the driver's side, not being able to staff up accordingly. That's something that we can touch on later on in the webinar here, in terms of how do we leverage additional fleets, additional supply of drivers and vehicles that are already on the road in order to make up for some of that gap in the driver shortage. And then the second, we got two tied for seconds. We got high cost per trip and legacy software inability to innovate. So these are all things that we hear a lot from our partners in terms of, how do we lower the cost per trip? How do we serve riders, do more with less and serve riders with current resources? And then how do we innovate, and how do we build amazing customer experiences? So thank you all for your feedback there. Super valuable. And I think a lot of those topics will be covered soon here. And so the next thing I wanted to chat about is enhancing the customer experience. So we've heard that many agencies have similar goals for their fixed route and demand response systems. That is to provide a high quality rider experience in a cost-effective manner. So for most paratransit and demand response services, a high quality experience is measured by getting riders to where they want to go on time and in an informed and frictionless way. So I want to throw a couple questions over to Bonnie and then to Noah. So we'll start with you, Bonnie. How does Spare's technology support the creation of a superior rider experience?
So I would say this is one of the areas that I'm most excited about with Spare. I feel like, prior to Spare, our paratransit program was not in the 21st century. So one of the big changes that we've had with moving over to Spare, the first one that we rolled out was rider text messages. So prior to using Spare, only riders that were taking the on-demand trips got some sort of notification about their ride on either Uber or Lyft. But now all riders were getting a text message reminding them 24 hours in advance about the ride that they've made. They got a 1 hour notification, and then they get a notification when their vehicle is arriving. So I think that's huge for riders to be able to just a reminder about their trip, hey, it's on its way, the driver's here, because that hopefully has cut down a little bit on our, hey, did I remember to make that trip, or where's my driver? Just gives riders that extra reassurance. Another thing that we were super excited about rolling out was the rider-facing app. So prior to having the rider-facing app, riders had to just call in for every single trip. Now riders can book their trip, their ADA paratransit trip in the app. They can also book their mobility on demand trip right then and there when they want to book. This has been a big game changer because riders can book their trip on their own time. Some riders, depending on their disability, don't want to call in. It's much easier for them to schedule their trip in the app. It also, you don't have to wait on hold depending on the time of day and who's called out sick. Our reservation line can either have a pretty good response time, or you might have to wait on hold for quite a while before getting help. But that's been a huge change. You can also check on, where the driver is. You can, just like in Uber and Lyft, track your trip, whether it doesn't matter which provider we put you on, whether it's the pre-scheduled paratransit or an on-demand Uber or Lyft, you can all watch it through the PSTA Access app. So that's been really exciting. Another thing that I really was really difficult, I think, for our riders is that the pre-scheduled PSTA Access trips could only be paid for with cash or paper ticket that you had to request and pay for over the phone, and then we mailed them to you. It was definitely an older process prior to joining Spare. So either cash or paper ticket were your only choices on the PSTA Access service. Now riders can pay for any trip they want. They can pay for their standing orders with a credit card. So that's been really valuable. I think, one of the things that we were worried about as we moved over to Spare was that, riders were going to have a completely different experience, but because for the most part, riders didn't notice any big changes in how the service was delivered to them. They just got these extra perks of, the rider-facing app, the notifications, and being able to pay for the trips with a credit or debit card. So that, I just think that's been a really big game changer for us.
Yeah, it's been awesome to see the reaction of riders, Bonnie, and the big uptake in app bookings as well, especially for your MOD program. It's pretty cool. If I was a paratransit rider, I would love to be able to book a Uber or Lyft through an app and see that vehicle come towards me. It's definitely a great experience. And we'll probably touch on this later, but I know at Spare, we're working on a lot of other great innovations too, like even further enhancing our notifications and adding additional languages. And we're also working really, really hard to further improve the accessibility of all of our rider interfaces, whether it be the app or web, and boost them. I think we're at WCAG 2.1 AA now, and we're trying to improve that further. So lots of great things coming down the pipeline. But I'd love to hear from Noah. Noah, for the DART RAP program, what can you tell us about the Spare rider experience for your riders?
Yeah, absolutely. So riders that are participants in the rider assistance programs, they can book up to 7 days in advance, or they can book 1 hour out, which means that it's a very flexible in terms of booking. Something that we didn't have before that we have now is we're using Spare's white label rider application. Customers love that. The ones that are using it use it pervasively, use it for all of their trips. I was mentioning some of the pain around our payment systems. Our riders now are able to, save their credit card information and just pay for trips on a kind of pay-as-you-go basis. So they've been really enjoying that. They can book through web. They can call in over the phone to book those trips. So the rider experience has dramatically improved, especially, how seamless it is to book trips onto Lyft, which I know we're going to talk a little bit more about later on.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I think digital payments is such a big thing that we don't talk enough about in terms of providing, just a seamless experience for people to be able to pay for their trips, especially, if they're paying through app. But there are, we can definitely accept payment methods through the phone as well, which is super important. Awesome. So now that we've kind of discussed the rider experience kind of writ large, I'd love to kind of hear about each of your experiences with providing self-working tools, self-booking and self-serve tools to your rider populations who are generally comprised of a lot of seniors and those with disabilities. So starting with you, Bonnie, what approaches are you leveraging to drive the adoption of self-serve booking tools for your rider population?
Yeah, we definitely have struggled to get riders to use the app. We've made a lot of progress. I would definitely like to see more. Initially, we sent out a robocall and a robo-text to all of our eligible riders, letting them know that the service was available. When we added the Mobility on Demand program into Spare, those riders that preferred booking their trips on demand were more likely to use the app. So once we did that in April, we saw the use of the app definitely tick up. I think at that point, we also sent out another robocall and robotext in April, further pushing the app. Another thing that we want to do is put on our on-hold music for booking and checking on rides for our access service, letting riders know that you can use the app and you can download it, log in. I think that we have made a lot of progress with Spare on the ease of use of the app and how easy it is for riders with disabilities and seniors to use. I think we've got a good path going forward of even more changes that we can make to the app to make it even easier to use. I think that'll get even more riders from our program to start using the app.
Yeah, and I want to thank Bonnie and the PSTA team for really helping us speak to their riders and get feedback from the riders on the self-serve booking experience. We heard a lot of valuable feedback that we've been actioning on and we're continuing to do to improve our app and its accessibility. And I also, just wanted to say that one innovative thing that the PSTA and Spare teams put together for the launch of the app was a help desk to help riders actually be able to call in and get help with the app. So I thought that was a super cool initiative that we worked on as well. I'm going to throw it over to Chris. Chris, from your end, what sort of approaches have you guys been leveraging at Dart Wrap to drive the adoption of the self-serve booking tools? Because if you don't mind me mentioning, over around a third of your riders or total bookings are going to the app today, which is huge for a program like this.
Yeah, thank you, Quinn. And actually that help desk option you suggested, that actually sounds pretty interesting. So we may have to get some more information off of that. But yeah, no, obviously digital adoption is something we want. It makes it kind of streamlines and makes things more efficient over here in terms of reservations and agents and all of that manpower behind that. We've sent out notifications to customers to make them aware about the application itself, especially at the time of eligibility and when we get them initially on the program, whether that's sending them mail or email, or even talking to them on the phone. We have a couple agents in charge of eligibility. They're very well versed on that. And they're probably similar to a help desk agent as well, just in getting people up and running. But yeah, just making people aware of it is the first step. And there's probably also some opportunities, especially for instance, if we have long hold times on the reservations lines, which if whether it's just a high booking time or if we're short some agents, maybe offering an apology, but at the same time making that option known to customers, that they can also skip the line, so to speak, and book online. So there's some ways that we've done it, but like I said, continued adoption, I think, is key, just to be able to continue growing the program too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Well, you guys have done a fantastic job, obviously, given the proportion of trips that are booked through the app. And, we'll continue to work with you guys to push that number even higher. You mentioned eligibility. And so I wanted to throw a question over to Noah. Different agencies have varying sort of levels of complexity in regards to how they manage their eligibility. Noah, you mentioned earlier that your previous eligibility process was extremely manual. I'd love to hear, how has your eligibility process improved from both the rider's perspective and your internal teams, DART and MD's perspective?
Sure thing. Yeah. So our eligibility process, in order for our customers to qualify, they have to either be 65 and older or have a qualifying disability, which may not qualify them for paratransit. They also have to have residency information. And so, we have to receive those documents, same as you do for a paratransit program, review those documents. If there's something missing, communicating with riders. The system that we were using before, it was kind of custom built using a piece of technology that was really not meant for eligibility. It was more of a workflow than anything. So using the Spare Engage tool, it's like night and day. The speed with which we're able to handle our applications, how efficiently we're able to work through them has been really awesome for our the team that handles eligibility on the program. Being able to receive those applications online, being able to assign them, seeing how long they've been open, changing the status depending on what step they're in, if they are new cases, if we're waiting on additional eligibility documents, if they've been closed, if they've been denied, whatever it may be, much more efficient than what we were doing before.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been so happy to see the improvements to your eligibility process and the impact that's made. And, similarly excited to bring that to PSTA in the near future, as well as other partners that we're currently working on eligibility with. Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. So that wraps up the theme of customer experience. Now moving on to innovation in paratransit and eligibility-based transportation programs. As we've seen, a common theme across these services is rider equity. So through the mobility on demand and rider assistance programs, both PSTA and DART are offering innovative same-day services that offer flexibility and reliability to their eligible riders. Paratransit and eligibility-based transit services that operate primarily on dedicated vehicles are pretty expensive to operate and even harder to scale, as we saw with the poll of, the number one response was driver shortages and staff shortages. As well, alternative transportation programs can often require high administrative and operational involvement for many agencies that are already under-resourced. So how can we accommodate more trips and produce exceptional rider experiences, but with the same or fewer resources as before? This is something that we're thinking about a lot at Spare. And we believe that the future of paratransit and alternative transportation services will really rely on technological innovation. So this means challenging the status quo and leveraging an open ecosystem and the latest advancements in things like machine learning to connect trip demand to any fleet provider you choose. With a rapidly aging population that really outpaces younger age groups, there is more demand than ever before for inclusive and equitable transit. And we can't forget about the other riders, those who, due to a physical or cognitive disability, can't access fixed routes and perhaps don't even qualify for ADA paratransit. So what's the solution? Open fleets. Open fleets is a prime example of how Spare is innovating in this space by making use of the vehicles that are already on the road today. Our existing integrations with taxi companies and TNCs like Lyft, which includes regular Lyft, Lyft assisted, and soon Lyft wheelchair accessible vehicles, Uber, MTI, which is one of the leading taxi dispatch platforms, means that nearly 90% of all bookable vehicles in the entirety of North America are available today on spare through open fleets. Like that's an incredible statistic. 90% of all the vehicles out there you can tap into using spare. And it doesn't stop there, because Spare has really built open fleets as a proprietary architecture that can connect trip demand to any external fleet provider that an agency uses. Open Fleets covers the full spectrum of reservations through call-in, through IVR, web, and mobile app, scheduling, live monitoring, and comprehensive reporting. It unifies trip management of third-party fleets like taxi companies and TNCs into one centralized platform. Our open API makes it easy and quick to unify multiple fleets, regardless of who is operating them, from a single platform. And we're continuing to add further open fleets integrations as we speak. The thing is, no companies have really taken these approaches to transit in the past, and so we're really still in the early stages of blazing a path to a brighter technological future for transit. And we brought PSTA and the DART teams to the call today because they are using open fleets. So I'd love to ask a couple of questions. So to start off, over to you, Bonnie. Could you describe how your agencies are leveraging open fleets into your programs today?
Yeah, so I mean, at a higher level, that is something, just like you mentioned, that PSTA is really wants to keep moving forward on, and that's to use open fleets, other providers, give our riders the choice for on-demand rides. I always call it leveraging the existing capacity of those fleets that are already out on the road, like Uber and Lyft and taxis that are doing trips for the community. If we can leverage their capacity to do rides at a lower cost and with a lower wait time for our riders, I think it's really a win-win for everybody. And when we did our procurement for a software provider, we were looking for someone that could do traditional paratransit routing and scheduling, but a big part of our procurement was also looking for someone that would do integrations with open fleets like Uber and Lyft, and not just, hey, we could do that, or we're sort of willing to do it, but that we're aggressively going after those integrations, because I think most of us know Uber and Lyft are like no picnic to work with. So, it was really important for us that Spare was wanting to work with the non-dedicated providers. So the way we use them, I mean, from a basic level, like starting with the booking of the trip, whether the customer calls in or starts to book using the rider-facing app, everything is all integrated into Spare. When we book the ride for the customer, we can choose the provider. It's all right there. We don't have to pop out into like Lyft Concierge or anything else. Same thing for the rider. If they're booking a ride on demand to a dedicated or a non-dedicated fleet, they can see that right there. We have, for our program, the customers can make the choice. So they can choose, Uber, Lyft, taxi, whatever is going to work best for them. Then once the ride goes in, we can see everything, meaning our internal reservation agents, as well as the dispatch team, whether that's our dedicated providers or our internal reservation agents, can see the trips on the live map. So we can see, if a customer called in to book the trip, or they're not, really app or tech savvy, they want to know where their driver is, we can check on the live map. We can look at everything. We see it all in real time. We can cancel the trip. We can give the customer the information for their vehicle as many times as they need it, but they can also see that in the app. And then after the trip is completed, a big win for us internally is being able to see all of the data right there. And then when we do an export of trips, we can export, all of our paratransit trips that were done on a dedicated provider. We can include all of the trips that were done with Uber and Lyft all in one big export. So it's made data analysis and reporting really easy as well. I know we've got one more exciting question, but it's helped us kind of plan better for the future and how we can potentially change how our programs operate together that we weren't able to do before.
Absolutely. I just wanted to point out too, like how innovative PSTA and DART have been on these programs. Bonnie mentioned selecting a vendor that we wanted to work with Uber and Lyft and other TNCs and taxi companies. I mean, we've been talking to these like Uber and Lyft since 2019. We're so happy to have them as valuable partners of ours, and innovative agencies like PSTA and DART, who have been partners along with us on that journey. And I also just want to mention, like, optimizing the dedicated fleet as being a super important aspect of this as well. So, it's fair we don't just think about the open fleets, but we think about how to optimize the entire system. And as Bonnie mentioned, an MOD program at PSTA, riders actually have a choice of whether they go, what provider they want to choose. But other agencies and programs don't maybe make that a choice, and they provide the vehicle that's best from an efficiency or productivity perspective. So I wanted to throw it over to Noah. Noah, could you describe how your agency is leveraging open fleets?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bonnie did such a great job of outlining some of the benefits, but I can tell you how those things maybe apply directly to the rider assistance program. So certainly having the way that the spare integration is set up so that you can monitor the service so well, using the live map, actually being able to view where the customers are, being able to see the stages and the booking process that you are, having those trips incorporated into the reporting that you see. Those are all big benefits and things that we don't necessarily have on other programs where we use TNCs. So those things make it really great for staff, and the customer experience really is seamless. It's completely based on their eligibility. We put in their rider profile. If they need a wheelchair accessible vehicle and they're not able to be booked onto Lyft, and the system will not allow that to happen. You can't manually accidentally put somebody onto the wrong vehicle type. So that's really nice. And it does a lot of things. It helps us to decrease the number of complaints that we receive. Like I said, there's more program oversight. So it's a lot of benefits that it brings to us.
Awesome. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but you also have a kind of multi-fleet setup. So the rider opts in to Lyft, and then depending on availability of vehicles and whether they need a wheelchair accessible vehicle or not, they will kind of be automatically assigned a dedicated or vehicle or Lyft. It'll kind of make that system will make that decision.
Right. So we try to utilize our dedicated fleet as much as possible so that we get the most bang for our buck, and then the system is able to tell if it's going to have a wait time that extends our standards. It'll go ahead and put them onto a Lyft trip. It can even, if there is a person who needs to be moved from a vehicle or rebooked, it's very easy to put them onto a Lyft trip. So yeah, that's really great for us.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for the explanation on open fleets. Our final topic for today, and we'll have to go through this one pretty quickly because you guys had so many good things to say that we're a little bit short on time here. So our final topic is discussing the future state of these programs. And so I wanted to kind of start with, sorry about that. Oh yeah, that's correct. I want to start with Chris. So from your perspective, Chris, how do you foresee rider assistance programs and eligibility management evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the eligibility management. Ideally, it would be just an all digital experience, right, from the transit agency side. Of course, there will likely be customers that need a different method or something like that, and we're always happy to oblige. But just kind of continuing down that path of streamlining the experience, making it quicker, because if we get that information from the customer quicker, we can put them on the service quicker. So what helps us in that avenue helps the customer. Now, in terms of the service itself, hopefully we can continue to grow ridership. It'll become a bigger part of the programs that we provide. I think we can use a lot of the lessons that we learn with this program to look at ways of doing on-demand paratransit as well. So yeah, and in 5 and 10 years, I'm sure there might be a lot more advancements in the tech space as well. 2023 looks a lot different than 2013 did, so it's kind of even hard to look that far ahead. But I think we're excited, and anything that we can use to enhance the customer experience and better utilize the agency's in some areas fixed resources that we have to help more people, then I think all the better.
It's been the decade of transit innovation, or at least the last half decade. There's been a lot that's changed in that time frame. And thank you, Chris. And Bonnie, PSTA was one of the first agencies, one of the first, back in 2016 to deliver rider choice programs. In addition to some of a lot of the innovations that DART's worked on, using TNC and taxi partnerships. I think you had the TD late shift program. That one comes to mind. Now PSTA is one of the first agencies to offer same-day paratransit using a mixed fleet model. How do you foresee paratransit to continue evolve and innovating over the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, so for us, we really value the option for riders to take their trips on demand. So have made that, really push that out. For us, the mobility on demand program right now, the copay is cheaper for an on-demand trip than a paratransit trip. So we've seen a lot of riders feel excited about trying the on-demand program and then really like it, see the benefits of it, and move all their trips over and more. So I really think riders see the benefits of using TNCs. Lots of our riders, they have trouble getting out to a bus stop, but they may not need the hand-to-hand service or door-to-door service for traditional paratransit. So having those different levels available to the customers is huge. The on-demand piece is huge. I think, one of the things we want to do moving forward is not just say, okay, if you're booking your trip right now, we can only use these providers. If you're booking a trip for the future, we only use the ADA paratransit providers. Now that everything's in spare, we can think a little bit more about, swapping out the providers based on the rider's needs and what they agree to and opt into, so that, in the future, a trip that's booked out a few days in advance could be done on our dedicated fleet or on an Uber or Lyft. Same as if a rider's booking an on-demand trip right now, but we have some capacity on one of our dedicated vehicles to do that trip quickly, we could move the trip to the dedicated fleet. I think that, so in addition to providing the on-demand service to the riders, making sure that we're being as efficient as possible with our resources is going to be very important, as well as making sure that riders are getting the services that they need. Keeping everything, I think, all in one place will really make sure that, we're documenting everything correctly, what providers riders are willing to use and not use for specific trips. Having everything all together, I think, will take us into a good place in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about kind of balancing that rider experience with the, maximizing the value of your resources. And I know, Bonnie, PSTA, you guys already have kind of custom logic that pushes certain trips to user one of your non-dedicated providers, when the trip is going to be, kind of more cost effective to go over to that fleet, but still providing a really, really good experience for the rider to try to balance those two things. So a lot of innovative things happening, and we're excited to work with you on the further enhancements there. So I wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists, to Noah, to Chris, to Bonnie, for sharing their invaluable insights today. I'm going to hand it back to Terry now for some audience Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Quinn. Thank you to our panelists. We have about 7 minutes or so to go over questions. So any questions that we don't finish today, we'll definitely include that in the follow-up. So let's get started. We have a question here from Bill. Please describe how you manage same-day trip requests for riders who need an accessible vehicle. I'll point this question here to Bonnie.
Yeah, so right now, if a rider needs an accessible vehicle, we are currently only booking them to our mobility on demand provider that provides wheelchair service. That's a local wheelchair company, a wheelchair transport. In the future, we'd like to do, and then when I say future, I mean the next couple months, we are actively working on this with Spare, but would be to be able to put the trip out to Wheelchair Transport, who is the prime contractor for on-demand trips. But if they're not able to pick that trip up in I don't know, whatever threshold we set for the amount of time, that we would move that trip over to a dedicated provider, maybe sort of based on where the available vehicles are, what the wait times are, have that logic on the back end with Spare to be able to send the trip out to the wheelchair accessible vehicle that will get there the quickest. But yeah, right now we do have an integration with the local wheelchair provider. We just send it directly to them.
Right, thanks, Bonnie. And I know there on the back end, there is like custom logic that we can do there to route those vehicles to make sure that the rider who needs an accessible vehicle gets that ride. We have a question here from Laura Anderson, and I'll direct this one to Noah here from DART. Was a healthcare professional required to sign the application, or were they processed internally? I believe this is speaking to the eligibility side.
Right, so they're not required to sign the application per se, although they are on the paratransit side. Customers who have disabilities and want that to be the eligibility criteria, they do have to provide a note from a doctor or from their healthcare professional certifying that they have no disability.
Right, thanks so much, Noah. Next question here is from Susie. So for Bonnie, this is for your mod service. Do you report the mobility on demand trips to the PSTA via the National Transit Database?
So we plan to in the future. So we do report our traditional paratransit, our Transdev contractor user. We are reporting local taxi, any of the trips that they do, including the on-demand trips. We've had some trouble with Uber and Lyft because at least in Pinellas County, we don't have the shared like Uber pool or Lyft shared. I don't know what they call them anymore. I know Uber is reopening some version of the shared platform so that maybe we would be able to report those trips. It's just going to be a challenge, internally with our agency working with Uber to make sure that we get all the documentation needed. So short answer, we're not reporting most of our on-demand trips because they are done by Uber and Lyft, but we will start exploring at least reporting Uber if I survive that challenge.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bonnie. There is another question here for you from the audience, and that's, are the mobility on demand and ADA paratransit resources managed as a collective unit, or are these fleets and operations separate within your program?
Right now, they're a little bit separate, and that is because we used to have two separate softwares running. We had one that ran, traditional paratransit, the other run MOD. So the dedicated fleet, Transdev, their sub, and any trips that were booked in the future, so for tomorrow or beyond, we only gave to those fleets, and they're set up a certain way in Spare. And then if a trip is being booked for today, right now, we'd give it to Uber, Lyft, and the other local wheelchair provider, and we have that set up a certain way. But now that everything's in Spare, we are exploring in the next couple of months how to have Lyft do a trip that's days in advance, or have a trip go to our could be sent to Uber, but if we have a dedicated vehicle right there, possibly using that dedicated vehicle that's for the traditional paratransit service. And I really think these, at least some of my dreams, are possible in Spare. We're already getting started on some of them, at least at the lower level right now. Hopefully
Absolutely.
Question.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bonnie. It's really exciting that we're partnering and innovating together here. So this really brings us to the end of the webinar. So again, thank you so much to all the panelists for your time and the audience here as well. I will pass it over to Quinn for final remarks as we wrap things up. And for any questions that we didn't get answered today, we'll be including that in our follow-up.
Thanks so much, Terry. Yes, and again, huge thank you to Bonnie and Chris and Noah for being our panelists today. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights. We do truly believe that the potential of transportation goes well beyond what we've seen today, and the key to unlocking that potential begins with serving those who need it most. So thank you so much from the Spare team to everyone who joined our webinar today. We wish you all a wonderful day and week. And then if you have any questions for us, we didn't get to answer one of your questions today, we will reach out, and then you can also reach out to us as well. Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.